Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. My landlord illegally evicted me and gave my apartment to his friend, laughing. You can't fight this. But when I took him to court, and the judge revealed a secret clause, his smug smile disappeared. I had been living in my San Francisco apartment for over a decade. It was a modest one-bedroom in the Mission District, but it was home. I paid my rent in time, kept the place clean, and never caused any trouble. One morning, I returned from my night shift at the hospital to find the locks on my apartment changed. A man I didn't recognize was standing by the door. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I asked. "Just following orders," he replied, not meeting my eyes. Then my landlord, Mr. Victor Langston, appeared. He was an older man always, dressed in a suit that seemed too big for him. "You're being evicted," he said, handing me a piece of paper. "You have 15 minutes to gather your things." I was stunned. "Evicted for what reason?" he smirked. "You violated the lease by having unauthorized guests. My friend will be moving in you. Can't fight this." I felt my blood boil. "This is illegal." He laughed. "Try proving it." I had no choice but to leave. I grabbed what I could carry and walked away, tears streaming down my face. I spent the next few nights sleeping in my car. During the day, I researched tenant rights at the public library. I discovered that in California, landlords must follow a legal process to evict tenants, including providing proper notice and obtaining a court order. Mr. Victor Langston had done none of that. I reached out to a local legal aid organization, and they agreed to help me file a lawsuit against him for illegal eviction. I gathered all the evidence I could, copies of my lease, photos of my apartment, and a detailed timeline of events. On the day of the hearing, Mr. Victor Langston appeared confident. He had a lawyer with him and looked at me with disdain. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, listened patiently to both sides. When it was my turn, I presented my evidence and explained how I was evicted without due process. Mr. Victor Langston's lawyer argued that I had violated the lease by having unauthorized guests. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof of this violation?" The lawyer stammered. "Well, no. But Mr. Victor Langston received complaints from neighbors." The judge turned to Mr. Victor Langston. "Did you provide Naomi Grant with a written notice of eviction?" He shook his head. "No, I didn't think it was necessary." The judge sighed. "Mr. Victor Langston, California law requires landlords to follow specific procedures for eviction. You failed to do so." She then looked at Naomi Grant. "Your lease includes a clause that any disputes will be resolved in favor of the tenant, unless the landlord can provide substantial evidence of a violation. Mr. Victor Langston has provided none." Mr. Victor Langston's face turned pale. His smug smile vanished. The judge ruled in my favor. She ordered Mr. Victor Langston to pay for my temporary housing expenses, return my belongings, and reinstate my lease. She also fined him for illegal eviction. I moved back into my apartment, and Mr. Victor Langston's friend was forced to leave. Word spread quickly among tenants, and many thanked me for standing up to him. A few weeks later, Mr. Victor Langston sold the building. The new landlord was more respectful and followed the law. I learned that standing up for your rights is not easy, but it's worth it. Sometimes, the little guy wins. You'd think after winning in court, things would calm down, that I'd get my apartment back and go on with life. But no, things got worse, much worse. 2 weeks after moving back in, weird things started happening. It started small. My mail went missing. I get half-open envelopes or important letters just wouldn't show up at all. Then someone egged my car 3 times, once in broad daylight while it was parked right outside the building. I knew it had to be connected. Mr. Victor Langston might have lost in court, but his ego hadn't taken the loss well. And his friend, the guy he tried to move into my place, was still hanging around. I'd see him loitering, across the street just standing there watching one time. I walked outside and he smirked at me, then said, "Don't get too comfortable." One night around 3 a.m. I woke up to a loud banging sound. It was coming from the hallway. I opened the door just enough to peek out. No one was there, but my door frame had a fresh scratch. It looked like someone had tried to jimmy the lock. The next morning, I checked my keys. My spare set, the ones I kept hidden inside a taped envelope behind a kitchen cabinet, were gone. That's when I knew someone had been in my apartment while I was at work. Nothing looked taken, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had walked through my space, touched my things. That kind of violation, you don't just forget it. I started talking to my neighbors. Most were friendly but nervous. A few of them had been there longer than I had. One older man named Miguel Ortega, who lived 2 floors up, pulled me aside in the laundry room. He spoke in a low voice. "Mr. Victor Langston has done this before," he said. "You're not the first. He tries to scare people out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't." "What happened to the others?" Louise hesitated. "One woman took a deal to leave. Another just vanished. No one's heard from her. She left stuff behind. Did anyone go to the police? Police say it's a civil matter. Always a civil matter." A week later, I came home to a soaked kitchen, floor water everywhere. I followed the puddle and found my water heater had been tampered with deliberately. The pressure relief valve had been removed. I called the gas company, and when the guy came out, he looked at it and said, "This didn't break, someone messed with it." That was enough for me. I filed a police report. This wasn't just harassment anymore, it was sabotage, dangerous. But the officer I spoke to shrugged. Without proof of who did it, there's not much we can do. Of course. I went back to my lease and re-added it line by line. Then I found a clause buried on page 4. It said, "If the landlord engages in retaliatory or harassing behavior following legal action taken by the tenant, the lease shall be considered breached, and the tenant may pursue additional compensation and protective relief." I couldn't believe it. My lease didn't just protect me, it gave me a path to fight back even harder. This time, not just for eviction, but for the hell he was putting me through. I contacted my legal aid, Repagan. I showed her the clause. She stared at it, eyes wide. "This is gold," she said. "We can reopen the case." As we filed the new complaint, more things came to light. The building had dozens of violations on record. Victor Langston had been avoiding inspections for years. Tenants had been afraid to speak up, but with my lawsuit, people started talking. Then something unexpected happened. Someone sent me a message. It was anonymous, a letter left under my door. It read, "You're not the first, but you might be the last. Keep going. There's more than you think behind that smile of his." There was no name, just a return address from Sacramento. I was confused. What did Sacramento have to do with any of this? The return address was a P.O. box in Sacramento. At first, I figured it was a red herring, but something told me not to. Ignore it. I drove up there on my next day, off figuring maybe I could talk to someone who knew more. When I got to the postal center, I asked the clerk if they could give me any info about the box holder. "Ace expected," she said. No, it was private. But when I described the situation, briefly she went quiet. Then she said, "You didn't hear this from me, but you're not the first person asking about that box." I pressed her gently. "Who else?" She glanced around. A woman last month said she used to live in a building owned by a Victor Langston. She looked scared. Something wasn't right. I started digging into public records, property ownership, eviction filings. I pulled everything I could find on Mr. Victor Langston. What I found shocked me. He didn't just own one building. He owned 11 all across the Bay Area. And his name wasn't just Mr. Victor Langston. His full name was Victor Langston, Bernard Victor Langston Jr. That middle name made the difference because that's when I found a lawsuit from 1998, a wrongful eviction case in Oakland. The tenant won. The judge ruled that Mr. Victor Langston Jr. had used intimidation tactics, including cutting power, fake maintenance calls, and you. Guessed it, changing locks without notice. It was him. He'd been doing this for decades. I contacted the lawyer from that 1998 case, just hoping he was still practicing. His name was Clay Rogers, old school sharp and a bit grumpy. But when I told him what was going on, his voice changed. I always wondered if he kept going. People like that, they don't just stop. He offered to help on the new case, said he'd do it pro bono, if needed. I felt like I was finally building an army. Then Clay asked me something that sent chills down my spine. Did anyone ever go missing from your building? I thought back Miguel Ortega told me one. Woman left everything behind. Get me her name, he said. The night after I met with Clay, I came home from work and saw fire trucks outside my building. For a second, I thought it was just another neighborhood incident. But as I walked closer, my stomach dropped. It was my floor. A unit 2 doors down from mine had caught fire. Kitchen explosion, they said, faulty wiring. But the timing perfect felt like a warning. The tenant, an older woman named Irene, was in the hospital, badly burned. She'd lived in that building 20 years. Never had a single electrical issue. Another accident. With Clay's help, we subpoena Ed City records, housing complaints, and even old leases. That's when we discovered the biggest twist of all. Mr. Victor Langston had a silent partner, a man named Darren Fields. On paper, he didn't exist. In connection to the building, but through a holding company, Blue Haven Trust, he co-owned most of the properties. Darren Fields was a city housing inspector. He'd been the one signing off on inspection reports saying everything was up to code. He was in on it. Every violation, every fixed inspection, every complaint that disappeared, it all led back to him. This was the breaking point. I had installed a small hidden camera in my living room. After the break-in scare, I'd almost forgotten it was there. One night after my shift, I checked the footage and saw something I can't unsee. 2 men, one of them was Victor Langston's friend, came into my apartment while I was gone. They didn't take anything. They just looked around. One even picked up my photo frame, stared at it, then laughed. That was the proof we needed. We weren't just dealing with harassment, we were dealing with a conspiracy, Clay. And I sat down with the footage and mapped out a strategy. This wasn't just a civil case anymore. This was criminal. We planned to present everything to the DA, but we had to be careful. If Fields found out, he could bury the case before it began. We needed alleys, honest inspectors, tenant groups, media, contacts. We started building a coalition. And just when things started coming together, I got another anonymous letter. This one just said, "They're watching you. Be careful who you trust." And it had a photo inside a recent one of me sitting in my car. After the photo showed up, I knew we were running out of time. I started sleeping with a crowbar beside my bed. I double-locked every door. I bought a second dash cam for my car. Clay warned me not to be alone whenever possible. Meanwhile, the coalition was growing. We had 2 ex-tenants from another building who agreed to testify. Both had similar stories, fake violations, forced out no paperwork, and someone else moving in right after. But we were still missing one thing: someone from the inside. Then one night I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice whispered, "I worked maintenance for Victor Langston. 5 years ago, I know what they did. I'll talk." We met in a diner in Daly City. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He called himself Ray and said he quit after Victor Langston and Fields asked him to accidentally leave a gas line uncapped. He said someone got sick, real sick. Ray gave us documents he'd saved, emails, texts, even a blueprint, showing how they bypassed inspections using hidden access panels. He had nothing to gain. He just said, "I stayed quiet too long. You look like you're not scared." Truth is, I was terrified, but I couldn't stop now. With everything we had, we finally went to the DA. This time, they took it seriously. They launched a formal investigation. When they raided Victor Langston's office, they found fake tenant ledgers, blank lease forms, and a burner phone filled with messages between him and Fields. That's when the headlines hit: Bay Area landlord and city inspector under criminal investigation for housing fraud. The court date was set. It was the same courtroom where Victor Langston once laughed at me and told me I couldn't fight him. No, he stood there in an orange jumpsuit. His lawyer tried to spin it, said he didn't know Fields was crooked, said the evictions were just misunderstandings. Then Clay stood up. He laid out everything: the false evictions, the harassment, the missing tenants, and finally the footage of Victor Langston's friend walking into my apartment, touching my things, violating my space. Then the emails, then the blueprint, and finally it spoke. I told the court how I slept in my car, how I thought I was crazy, how no one believed me until I believed in myself. Guilty, both of them. Fraud, harassment, tampering with housing inspections, even conspiracy charges. Fields lost his pension. Victor Langston lost his properties. The judge ordered them to pay restitution to every tenant they'd ever evicted, illegally. But that wasn't the end. I had one last surprise. Right before sentencing, I asked. To speak, I walked up to Victor Langston. He looked old now. His smug face was gone. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. "You once told me I couldn't fight this," I said. "Now I'm telling everyone else. You can and you should." I turned and walked out. It took months to clean up the damage. I still flinch when someone knocks on my door too hard. I still check my locks twice every night. But I stayed in the same apartment not because I won, but because I refused Torin. And yet I made mistakes too. Ignored warning signs. I stayed quiet for too long. I thought being a good tenant meant being invisible. Never again. Now I work with a local tenant union. I help people document their cases. I teach them about lease clauses, inspections, and how to catch the little things that don't feel right. A month ago, I got one more letter. No return address, no handwriting on the envelope, just a folded paper. They're gone, but others aren't. Don't stop. There was nothing else. But I didn't need more because I won't stop. More because I won't